Unfinished Business television fans. Show your love for all things retro and movie magic by grabbing some awesome gear from ADSTs.com. Your go-to spot for the best nostalgic t-shirts from your favorite movies, TV shows, and pop culture classics. Use promo code UBTV at checkout to save on your order and support Unfinished Business television. While you're at it, relive the classics or the memories. Shop now at ADSTs.com with code UBTV.
Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of Unfinished Business Television. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, which is why I look like some misrepresented Russian gangster this episode. I am Jeff Galashaw, Unfinished B1, uh, your host. And with me, as always, is my co-host Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions.
I usually come up with something witty to say today, but given today's date that we're recording this, I'm just going to say rest in peace, Meathead.
Yes, unfortunately, Rob Reiner and his wife perished under tragic circumstances. So we send our hearts and our well wishes to their families, and we'll take a moment of reflection for Rob Reiner, who was not only an actor, writer, director, producer. And it was interesting as yesterday was the first time before I heard of what happened. I actually watched This Is Spinal Tap for the first time, a movie I've always heard about over the years, but I guess I was waiting for the perfect time. And hey, I was sick, so I was like, and it's on HBO Max. Let me give it a chance. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think I loved it as much as so many people have over the years, but I can see why it has its classic status, one of the best mockumentaries of all time. Which is interesting because eventually he did actually make a documentary about Albert Brooks, defending my life, which I think came out only a few years ago. But of course, I mean, the man, he's just iconic. You know, he was an early version of what you could call a Nepo baby because he's the son of the iconic Carl Reiner, but, you know, kind of, well, not kind of, but basically has his own work to stand on, not only All in the Family, as far as acting. He wrote the pilot script for Happy Days. He was married to Penny Marshall. He has plenty of supporting or bit roles in many movies. He's probably the best thing in Ed TV. He had a really good supporting role in the absurdist movie Where's Papa? And he had a streak, man, of directing. Not only, of course, This Is Spinal Tap, then he followed it off curiously with like the teenage kind of romantic sex comedy, The Sure Thing. But then he hit his stride when he got Stand By Me, A Few Good Men, Misery, When Harry Met Sally, one of the best romantic comedies of all time. Another late in life film that I saw that was always talked about over the years. The American President. I even liked his Boy Meets Girl in the 1950s, 60s film Flipped. I mean, he also made The Bucket List, not one of my favorite films, but I always liked that his films, The Princess Bride, you know, all these iconic films. But I always like that even when you watch his films, they were always warm. He had a clear vision, and the ensembles were the best things about his films, you know. I mean, just look at Stand By Me, just a nostalgic, light and dark coming of age story. And unfortunately, the that film seemed to be oddly prophetic for him. Because here's this story about life and some of the best things in life and your close friends in life. And it kind of ends a little tragically for one of the characters. And it comes out of nowhere. But still, you still remember the good things about it nonetheless. And it still stays close to your heart. And I think as a just a filmmaker and artist in general, other than a political activist, it's just an amazing how he raised another generation also with to have an imagination, and to put these films together that affect us. And he never had to be showy about it. He was never heavy-handed, and he just loved all around. And it's a huge loss, for the world, the filmmaking world, just in general. And
Yeah, I think for me, my early beginnings with Rob Reiner was that of an actor because when my grandpa was still with me, I used to go to his house after school, and all reruns of All in the Family were always playing. So obviously, him playing Meathead on the show, that was my first impression of him. But not realizing that that guy who was like very liberal, very leftist, would also go on to make these seminal films that we've all grown up on. And you talk about that streak. I mean, the guy had such a versatile body of work that was so impressive. You could never really pigeonhole him in a sense because to go from, something like This is Spinal Tap being so farcical and, self-parody, and then to do a teen film like The Sure Thing, then to go to Stand By Me, and then The Princess Bride. I mean, he was like kind of all over the map, but in a good way because he really put the quality into every film that he was doing in that time. I love A Few Good Men as well, and
oh
I've watched
yes.
after school and, just the great performances that came out of that and, memorable lines that were synonymous with culture after that film, among the other movies that he did. Um, I thought it was kind of fitting, weirdly enough, because I think the day before I heard the news, and I really didn't want to believe it when I first heard the news break, um, the Spinal Tap sequel was on. Now, I too have not seen the original Spinal Tap. I was almost supposed to see it with a friend years ago, and that didn't work out. But I was watching just a little bit of the second one, and I was planning to maybe get back to it at some point, or at least get to the first one before I got to the second one. So it was like oddly and disturbingly fitting that his first breakout movie was Spinal Tap, and then his final film would be the sequel years after. So that really gave me like a chill when the news broke yesterday or last night, and then we now know today. But more so than that, yeah, there's the political activism. But even when you saw him as an actor in movies, there was just something welcoming about him. He just had that larger than life presence, similar but not exact to John Candy, but somebody that you felt like he made you feel safe, right? And that was something that always gravitated. Even when I listened to him in interviews, he just seemed like a regular guy beyond just the filmmaking and the acting, and just really deeply cared about the country and cared about people. And that's the way that I'd like to remember Rob Reiner, not just as this titan of a talent with a streak of really amazing films, but somebody that was just a genuine person, not just a Hollywood person.
Exactly. I mean, he also had appearances in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Mhm.
He was a big proponent to get uh, gay marriage legalized in California.
Yeah.
He's always a political activist, throughout his life. And I think that showed how much he cared about people, whether you were on his side or against. And you know, it's sort of like how now even his death has to be politicized online with Republicans sitting here saying, "Oh, see, we it doesn't matter that he was a Democrat." Then if it doesn't matter, why did you need to bring it up? And why
Exactly.
can't we just say rest in peace to a person, a great man, no matter what his beliefs were?
And
So
especially given the circumstances, again, this is still a pending investigation as we're recording this, but given what we do know about it, I mean, shut the fuck up, Republicans. Let the family grieve through this. Let his friends and colleagues grieve. Why does everything have to be political bullshit all the time? Just because the guy believed in one thing or another. We kept our voices silent in another direction that happened months ago, and we tried to be respectful, but you want to make this into something like no.
Well, and unfortunately, the person that's in the White House has chosen to go to a new low in his speech about, or his commentary about this, that it's just disgusting, and truly shows the type of person and the type of man he is. And so, um, definitely rest in peace, Rob Reiner. You will be missed. I think it's still kind of the shock of it is still affecting us, and
Yeah, I think it's fitting I wear my Castle Rock today.
unfortunately, another recent passing is Peter Green, an character actor who most people might remember as the villain of The Mask, but he was also in the indie films Laws of Gravity and Clean Shaven, where he gave some great performances. He also had a small role in The Usual Suspects, or a movie we always like to talk about around here, Judgment Night. He had a small role in that. Um, Always usually played villains. Always was really good. Had a lot of maybe personal demons in his life, so that he never kind of got to jump on, that fame or that heat from his roles. I mean, he was in Pulp Fiction, and I was his character name Maynard. It's
I forget. I just remember the GIMP.
Yeah, and Zed's dead, baby. Zed, maybe he was Zed. And I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've seen that movie, so I couldn't name his character, but he was another one who passed away unfortunately this weekend. And rest in peace to him. Uh he will be missed. And so unfortunately we have to go on with the show at this point, but no, we will they both will always be in our hearts for one reason or another. So let's get to these movies. And um, the first movie we'll talk about is Wes Anderson's latest, The Phoenician Scheme. This is a all-star film again, with Benicio del Toro, who's having a hell of a year with this and One Battle After Another. Here he center stage. Um, he has Tom Hanks, Bryan Cranston, Benedict Cumberbatch, Scarlett Johansson, just a whole bevy of actors, as he is this businessman, uh, practically a millionaire who has sons, but decides he wants his daughter to help him get out of bankruptcy, who is now practicing nun, as he goes around the world to make business deals with his creditors to kind of get out of debt, but also bring his business back up. And he has to literally fight corporate pirates to do all this throughout the film, as well as the mystery as to the death of his wife. Um, I saw this movie in theaters, and I can say I think I dug this a little bit more than I did Asteroid City, his last film. I felt Asteroid City was more of an homage to something, whereas this was more kind of an original idea that kind of is a throwback to those kind of espionage films, but instead of, having like the world secrets, this is more business secrets. And it's more comedic, but it does have its wears its heart on its sleeve a lot of times. Um, it's not my favorite Wes Anderson film, but it is a welcome return to kind of his style and more originality, which isn't as predictable. And as always, the movie's beautiful to look at. So I don't think he'll ever make an ugly movie. But again, this is another film where style is over substance, but at least this one feels like there was more substance here. I think he still has that Robert Altman problem of like everybody in the cast must be of note. So half the time you're just like, oh, isn't that? And you're just trying to see what they're doing and how they fit into the film. There's also a return for Michael Cera, another person who's having a good year as far as films is going. Um, I would give this film a recommendation. I wouldn't give this a high recommendation. If you're not into that Wes Anderson style, you're not going to like this movie. But if you can stand Wes Anderson, I don't think you're going to mind this film at all. Andre, what did you think of the Phoenician Scheme? Mm.
Well, there are some Wes Anderson films that I can gravitate to that I think are brilliant, like Rushmore, also not much. um, yeah, just that Life Aquatic, Royal Tenenbaums. I like that stuff. And then there are the ones that are a little bit harder to digest. And I think this one for me just falls in the latter. I think, again, I agree with you. The cinematography is beautiful, the set design is beautiful, performances are top notch. Del Toro holds it together. I like Benedict Cumberbatch's role. Everybody else kind of like comes and goes, and I like Michael Cera in it as well. But honestly, there were just a lot of times I think my attention was just drifting off because I didn't really grasp the business part of it and what was happening. So that was probably where I felt a bit of a disconnect as an audience member. Whereas Asteroid City, yeah, that had flaws, but I could at least kind of get an understanding of what's happening story wise with it. And never felt like it was going in like 8 million directions because everything felt pretty well connected. So I think if you're a fan, yeah, I'd recommend it. But for me, like if you're just a general audience goer, it's a little hard to follow.
Well, the only time I think I found it hard to follow was then when they got kind of into the religious stuff with like F. Murray Abraham and Bill Murray's characters. That's where I was like, okay, I think now you're overstuffing it a little. Literally a Greek chorus, but other than that, I enjoyed most of the film, and I liked it well enough. I think it goes on the shoulders of his other films. I don't think this will be a Criterion Collection movie, but I think it does well enough. Um, and now, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I recommend it.
Do you have a favorite scene of the film? And
Towards the end with the purple smoke bomb fight between Benicio del Toro and Benedict Cumberbatch, I thought that was pretty funny.
okay, okay. Our next film is Novocaine, not the Steve Martin, Helena Bonham Carter femme fatale movie, but the Jack Quaid and Amanda Mid the Thunder, Ray Nicholson action comedy about a guy who has a medical condition where he can't feel pain and finally finds the love of his life with a bank teller. And of course, just when he falls in love, the bank gets held up and she is taken as a hostage, and he goes about trying to save her in way over his head. And I have to say, I didn't expect much with this film, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself with this movie. It kind of reminded me of that sci-fi film. Remember about the guy who was like kind of a paraplegic and then he gets nanobots in his body and all of a sudden he
Mhm.
can walk and fight again. It kind of reminded me of that film, only not as dark. And I like that this wasn't just, oh, the guy feels no pain, there are no consequences. I like that in this film he can also die because some of these wounds could, he could bleed out or he could die from these wounds instead of just being like, oh, like the Terminator and never die. I like the film. This is a film where I would like to petition to the studios. This is why you need a few mid-budget films because then you get a surprise like this that at least feels original and fun, more than something where you spend $200 million on and you don't remember anything about it really. Electric State, for instance. And I mean, this is a more of a modest budgeted film, but also this is a film that, for all its special effects, uses practical effects, and again uses locations and not a green screen, the fake places, and where the film has to be over $100 million. And Jack Quaid, I mean, he's in a lot of films, so I know he can handle the leading man, and he's good as that kind of regular guy called into action. I wish this film, I could say, had supporting characters who steal the show, but I think just all the off the wall situations that happen throughout, plus a surprise twist at the end, is what kind of makes you keep going with the film. The detectives feel a little bit like the detectives of Hard Eyes, where it seemed like they were more there for comedic purposes than action purposes. Especially the one cop, who's not the black female.
Mhm.
So, but I think I liked, not that I think I liked it. I did like the film. I wish I had more enthusiasm for it, but I think this is the type of film more studios need to make something original, crowd pleasing, and you don't necessarily need a star to sell the material. So I'm going to give this film a recommendation. Andre, how did you feel about the film? Mm.
Well, just like you, I went in with very minimal expectations. Not because, I think Jack Quaid's just average, but I just felt like we've gotten so many John Wick knockoffs that this didn't look any different in the trailers. But then I
Hmm.
saw it, and not only did I think he had a likable quality like he does on The Boys, but I liked the relationship with him and Amber Midthunder and how their characters have a unique connection to each other that you end up kind of rooting for them. And I did like the twist that happened in the middle of the second act. The action scenes themselves, I also thought were very top notch because it wasn't fully feeling like it was choreographed. It was very messy. It was a lot of brutality involved. And it made it feel as if, yeah, this guy could easily die, even though he's almost impervious to anything that they throw his way. But he still gets knocked around. He still, like mentally gets kind of screwed up throughout the situation that he's in. And the supporting characters could be a little bit better, but I will say that the kid that plays Ned in the Spider-Man movies, I enjoyed his performance in there. And what were they like, gaming buddies? It's been a while
Yeah.
since I see. Yeah, so I kind of like that and how that goes. I give it a recommendation too. I think I'm not going to say this should be a franchise or they should be doing multiple sequels to it,
No.
but just as, like you said, just a mid-budget movie that is just a fresh new story. I like it, and I think we need more movies like that.
Oh yes, I agree. The movie I was trying to think of was named Upgrade. That was the name of the movie that it
Yeah, I've
kind
seen
of
Upgrade.
reminded me of. Um, did you have a favorite scene of the film? And
It was the scene he's in the apartment, and I think he's tied up. Remember, like he's handcuffed and he's trying to get
Mhm.
out, and the bit where he gets the arrow stuck in his leg.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well there were like 20,000 different traps he falls victim to. Uh, um, I also wanted to say this is not the only film that I saw this in recently. I like this despite it having the thing I can't stand in movies, protruding bones throughout, like you're peeking out through the skin, and fingernail torture. I
Mm.
cannot stand that. The only thing that was missing teeth. But I still liked it despite that. So I think I'll warn the audience, it is a little brutal, but it's worth it. So definitely give it a chance. Our next film is a film that in the old days would have been a big hit just from cast alone, but surprisingly flew so low under the radar that it barely made a blip. And I am talking about Good Fortune, written, directed, and starring Aziz Ansari, with Keanu Reeves and Seth Rogen and Kiki Palmer, about an angel who wants to have more responsibilities. So he has a rich man and a poor man switch positions and is thoroughly shocked when the rich man does not, I mean, a guy who used to be poor and becomes rich does not want to switch back. And thus loses his job. So now the angel is sent back to Earth as a human. Now, this film I like for its earnestness, and I think this is one of the better Keanu Reeves role that he's done in a while. Maybe because he's not like killing 40,000 people on screen, and so he's given the odd comedic role, and he excels in it. Because even as an angel, women think he's beautiful. He just comes across as a little like Keanu Reeves, but a more naive Keanu Reeves because all the women love him. He's earnest. Like he becomes obsessed with chicken nuggets, smoking, working, and seeing how like the working man has all his money taken away. And I even like Seth Rogen, even though not it's nothing against him, but I just feel like he doesn't really have that much to do, and he's one of the stars of the film. And the problem with the film is it feels about 5 to 10 years too late. Like if this had came out 5 to 10 years earlier, maybe it would have been on the cutting edge and saying something. Like maybe during the first Trump presidency, this would have been saying something. But now it just feels outdated. And actually, the weakness of the film is Aziz Ansari. Like he's not that him. I don't know if it's his character or his acting, but he just does not come off as that interesting, nor like you look forward to any time the story goes to Seth Rogen and Keanu Reeves' character because they're interesting. But anytime he comes on screen, it slows it down. And it's not just because he has that romantic storyline with Kiki Palmer, which, no offense, was not believable at all. Kiki Palmer is very good in the film, and it's a shame. He unfortunately is the weak link. It would be like if Woody Allen made a film, a romantic comedy, and put himself in it, and he's actually the thing that kind of ruins the film. I have no problem with the direction, the writing. If somebody else had maybe played the role and done something with it, maybe this film could have been better. But I have to give this a mild recommendation. I give it more if I recommend it, it's more for Keanu Reeves. That's really it. And the rest of the cast other than Aziz Ansari. Andre, how did you feel about Good Fortune?
Well, this is going to be a pattern with some of the movies that we're reviewing today where you have a very strong setup, but then you can't really stick to landing towards the end. And this is one of the first films where I could really talk about that. I think the setup is solid. Aziz Ansari, we see that he's just got a streak of bad luck. He can't hold down a job. He gets a job with Seth Rogen, who seems to have it all, and he screws it up. And his guardian angel, inadvertently, he's trying to teach him a lesson. Instead, they do the trading places thing where Rogan becomes the poor man, Aziz Ansari becomes the rich guy. But once that happens, I mean, yeah, Rogan, I like seeing that he goes from this dick you don't like to suddenly now he gets his comeuppance and then has to sort of come out the other side, realizing the error of his ways. But Aziz Ansari, to me, never really felt like he had a real arc. Because once he becomes that rich person and then he starts to indulge, I don't feel like he really learns anything. It's just the obvious deal of like, oh, now Kiki Palmer doesn't really like him like that. And she's definitely miscast in this film. Given her talents and what we know she's able to do as a comedic actress and even as a serious actress, I just maybe it's just me personally because I'm so used to that little girl from Aquila and the Bee. I just never really bought the relationship and the attraction to her character. But Keanu Reeves definitely is the best thing about it because it is a welcome return to like the Bill and Ted territory where he really is very aloof about everything that he's doing. And I love the bits of how fish out of water he is when he does have to live amongst the humans, especially when he has to take the job in the Mexican restaurant. I thought that stuff was very hilarious and just learning things along the way. Like you mentioned, when he gets stoned in the mansion, when he flirts with the one girl in the mansion as well. That stuff is like the Keanu Reeves of old that I feel like we've been missing for a long time. But otherwise, yeah, I'm sorry. I've never been a big fan of his, but this just really needed more of a like another draft or two to really have something that was solid. Because again, there's some good setups. This could have been your trading places for the new millennium, but it just doesn't stick to the landing. So that's why I can't recommend it.
Okay. So, our next film we're going to talk about is a sequel to a surprise hit from last year, Nobody 2, with Bob Odenkirk, RZA, Christopher Lloyd, Connie Nielsen, Colin Hanks, and surprisingly, which I didn't know until I saw the film, Sharon Stone. I'm going to let you talk first about Nobody 2, as you are more of a fan of the Nobody franchise. So, Andre, what did you think of Nobody 2?
Well, I like the first one, but I think this one's just a notch better, in my opinion. And again, I didn't see it in the theater because I kind of felt like what else is there to really say is going to be fresh? Bob Odenkirk being this out of the box action hero, he's going to get his ass kicked, but somehow he's going to find a way to win the battles. It's more the same, but at least I think they raise the stakes with the action. They give Riz a little bit more to do. You know, he shows up like in the third act. Always a pleasure to see Christopher Lloyd in anything that he does these days. We got to cherish this guy while we still got him. So he gets a lot of funny bits. He gets involved in the action. The plot, the bad guys are kind of all over the place, and Sharon Stone is supposed to be the big bad threat this time. I mean, it was decent, but it wasn't anything that was like, oh, this is going to be a big event. Sharon Stone coming back on the screen as a villainous. Yeah, not that great, but I liked the action, and I really liked how now the whole deal is that the marriage is kind of on the rocks. So hey, let's go on a vacation. Let's get everybody together, and then it's in this town where shit goes array because the Colin Hanks of all people is this asshole sheriff, and you got the Spanish dude that's in all the movies. He's the one that also seems to be like the big sheriff that doesn't want him in town. And there was like an interesting twist of his character that I didn't see coming that made it a little bit different than just, oh, they're making this like a modern day Western. And even like my favorite scene in the whole film is when they're in the arcade with the daughter and I guess this boy that she's talking to, or the brother, I forget. And then the local bullies start to bully around, and then the guy that runs the place slaps her in the head, and that's what causes Bob Odenkirk to lose his shit. That to me made me want to stand up and cheer. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's like the greatest action film of all time. I'm going to give it a mild recommendation because I know it's got some flaws compared to the original. It's not like it's doing anything superbly new, but for just escapist entertainment where I get my popcorn and just enjoy the ride, I liked it.
Okay. I I didn't hate this film, but I didn't like it. And I'll tell you why. Even though I like that Timo, I can't say his last name correctly, but the guy who made movies like Headshot and The Night Comes for Us, he's an excellent action director, and I have no problem with the action sequences. But I felt like this movie was it felt very rushed. Like they were planning the action sequences before they figured out the storyline. And so for that, I just couldn't really get into it. And again, saying Sharon Stone is in the film, it felt like a glorified cameo, and she's the villain. We understand that she's ruthless, but she's barely in it. Like most of the handiwork is done by Colin Hanks before she even really shows up. So then it's like, oh, it's almost like a relay race. Like, okay, I did all this bad shit. Now let's give it to you. You know. So and it has. I mean, even the first film had the same problem. It has the equalizer problem, where nobody's a challenge. Going into it, he's always going to win every fight. I mean, at least in these movies, the villains get their licks in, but ultimately he's going to win. And I think the problem for me, like Christopher Lloyd's character was a big surprise in the first film. Here, he's going to come in eventually, and wreck house. So that was the problem. It was like there were no real surprises anymore in this film. And like the marital problems and all that just felt like we needed some problems in the first and second act. Because then she quickly adapts, which you would think by now she would have learned to accept. I do like that now it's more him working for an agency and trying to pay back his debt rather than just being a lone wolf out there, finding trouble where, again, being the equalizer. Um, but I'm sorry, I can't recommend this film. I really want to, but it was just like, would I ever want to watch this again? And I can say, honestly, no, but I will say, if you really enjoyed the first film and you're just looking for more of the same, yeah, you'll like it. But if you're looking for something original or different, this is not your film. So, the next film, I mean, I know this film came out all the way in the summer, and now we're finally reviewing it. But we're going to talk about the big screen Brad Pitt racing movie, F1, which almost sounds like a curse. Now, Andre, you actually saw this in a theater. So I'm going to let you take the talk about this film first. What did you think of F1 and what is this film about?
So with F1, the layman's version of the story is Brad Pitt is a Formula One racer who's somewhat retired. He's still racing around the world, but doing like these private competitions. And Javier Bardem is like the head of this racing group. They need him to race with Damson Idris, who's like the hot shot that's winning all over the world. Now they're about to race with F1. And so they don't get along, but then eventually they have to in order to win the big one. And yeah, that's basically the plot in a nutshell. And then there's some little bit of a conspiracy going on in the subplot with the organization and some of the people that are putting up the money. So that's like the only like part where they try to make it a little intriguing besides the racing. I think, you know, Idris is great. I think that guy has star potential because I watch him on Snowfall, and here he holds his own with Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt does the typical Brad Pitt performance, very laid back, very much just chummy, eating a lot, and he really shows like he's got a little bit of a PTSD thing going on and an addiction to the racing process. And the Joseph Kosinski, I think, does a great job with the cinematography. He makes the use of the IMAX cameras and really puts the audience into the driver's seat. So in that regard, I think it's a step up from Days of Thunder for a Jerry Bruckheimer production. Overall, this is one of those movies where I'll say the story is not particularly the strong suit of this film, and the performances are what they are. They're supposed to be hot shots and have attitude and who's the best type of a thing. But for the experience, it was worth seeing in the theater just for the large scale scope that they spent on shooting in IMAX. This is not a movie to just watch on streaming or on Apple, and it's weird that Apple funded this film. So this is why I'm going to give it a mild recommendation. I think it's more for like the racing enthusiast than a regular general audience goer. But if you like Top Gun, if you like Days of Thunder, it's up there.
Uh, well, this is a movie I've seen the most recently that we're talking about today. F1, I think, is a movie that is probably a better experience watching it in the theater. I think it did not need to be as long as it was.
No.
That I would. That's my most biggest complaint. But I did like the filmmaking. You see all the money up on the screen because this film looks expensive. Um, I wish they would have did a little bit more with Damson Idris's character, but again, finding out Brad Pitt got paid 30 million to star in this film, they're going to use their investment wisely and put him all over the film. The film's predictable as hell. Like soon as him and the female car designer start squabbling, you already know, oh, they gonna be bumping uglies before the end of the film. And we're right. I feel like Javier Bardem is only here to have another big name on the poster, and somebody we can care about other than Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is playing, the Paul Newman role, the near do well, the cool guy who it's never about the money. So much so that we have to have a credit sequence of him learning how to dune buggy. It's, you know, but against all odds, I did not have any initial interest in seeing this film. But I have to say, it won me over. I found it quite entertaining. Like I said, it's not reinventing the wheel, but I did enjoy while I was watching. I just wish they could have got to the point a little faster. We didn't need to see literally all 9 races. Again, this does feel like Days of Thunder too, almost, just with different characters.
And
And
it felt like a remake of Driven with Stallone.
yeah, and you already know what's gonna happen because everybody's here in their designer, race suits, and here he comes in with his jeans, his jean jacket, and say, "No, it's not about the money." And he throws cards into a hat. He doesn't seem to read or watch television. All he seems to do is like drink, lay around, and then race. That's pretty much all he does. And then I would have been more interested in the movie of his years as a taxi driver in New York, which they keep making this big thing of. I didn't get the whole thing of him giving the money to the reporter who's pestering him throughout the film. What was that about?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I thought it was like to give him some inside information. I don't remember.
Oh, I have no idea if so that could have been boned up. And I know that one of the cut storylines was that it was supposed to focus on Damson Idris having a girlfriend in their
Yeah.
romance. And here they more just show Damson Idris as, the upstart and who's close with his mother, and they focus more on that relationship. But yeah, they were wise to cut that because then this film would have been over 3 hours if they would have kept that storyline. And I'm like, yeah. And what would that have amounted to? Would it have affected the movie any differently? No. But I think I liked it maybe a little bit more than you. I give it a recommendation. Uh, I think it's more, but I agree with you. I think it's more for the car enthusiasts and race enthusiasts than anything. Because I'm just like, how many laps do these people have to do in this F1 racing? All I ever knew about F1 racing is expensive to attend, and the snack bar is very expensive. Like you're paying like $100 for a lobster roll at those concessions. So that is F1, a very pretty film. Now I think we're going to talk about probably the most controversial film of this episode, Ari Aster's Eddington, which stars Joaquin Phoenix, Pedro Pascal, Austin Butler, and Emma Stone, which is about a small town that is in the middle of COVID and basically has all the politics that were going on around in the world kind of microcosmed in this small town. And it mainly deals with Joaquin Phoenix's character battling who he thinks the corrupt mayor, who's more liberal minded, whereas Joaquin Phoenix's character wants to be more old school, don't wear mask, and all that. Now, I know some people like this film, some people hate it. Some people love to hate this film or hate to love this film. Excuse me. I have to say, I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed this film. I would have liked to have seen it on the big screen, but I think it would have been a hard sit with an audience because the whole thing is I'm trying to say this without ruining the film or anything. It's also kind of like a Donald Trump fever dream because who the villains end up being in the end, which comes out of nowhere, by the way. But I just like that. I wish this had been more of an ensemble. This film more focuses on Joaquin Phoenix's character only and his point of view. And we get some like interesting things like the black deputy, and he's somehow involved with the young kids, well, not the teenagers in this town who are taking on this Black Lives Matter, but have the nerve to tell him what he should be doing when here they are, kind of, white people jumping on this bandwagon of what's going on politically in a mostly white town. And then you have Pedro Pascal, who's supposed to be this do-gooder, but also you kind of get a kind of a smarmy vibe from him throughout the film. And then I think this film has the cruelest ending of the year that I've seen. Um, it never quite settles on how you're. This is where I think I enjoyed the film. It never tells you how you're supposed to feel about any of these characters. Either you like them, you don't, but it's all on you because they're not just one thing. Like you understand where Joaquin Phoenix is coming from. And I think a lot of people were also mad about the film because it doesn't take a stance. And it also kind of has all these big names, but in smaller roles or in bit roles where they kind of disappear from the film, but they're all integral to the story no matter what. So I definitely like this more than Beau is Afraid. But I think Beau is Afraid was more of a stylistic movie, whereas this film, I think, is more a written movie where there's a lot of things going on all at once. And I just really admired what was done here. So I am going to shock everybody and give this film a high recommendation. I don't think everybody's going to love it, but I think you should at least give the film a chance. What did you think of Eddington? And
Well, I think I liked it, and I am going to give it a recommendation first off. What I felt once it was over is kind of what you said. Like, what was the message of this film? Because it seemed to want to tackle on so many different fronts of what was happening 5 years ago. And I think you probably hit it where ultimately it's like there is no one direction. You're kind of left with the choice of what do you believe, who do you follow? Because everybody in that film is something of a walking contradiction. You can have a character that's getting on the Black Lives Matter bandwagon 1 minute, and then the next minute they become the next Charlie Kirk. Or you could have somebody that, is preaching about wearing masks and being safe, and then the next minute they're having a party, and it's like carefree, nobody gives a damn. So maybe there was something to be said on that front. I think the performances are generally fine. I am a little tired of Pedro Pascal though, because it's just he's been doing so many movies, and the performances end up feeling like almost interchangeable with each film that he does. Not say he's bad, but given that he's only in it for maybe half the movie, it just felt like you could have given this to any other actor. It didn't necessarily have to be Pedro. But that
true.
said, I think Joaquin Phoenix definitely holds it together. And I will also compliment Ari Aster on his skills shooting action scenes because holy shit, that whole third act where Joaquin Phoenix is running around this dead street and he's being hunted down by the villains that we won't name because we don't want to spoil what happens. But I love the cinematography of how he's following him from building to building, hiding around the corners, jumping into the weapons depot. And even that little bit where he shoots a couple of these guys and the camera's just like going around him like in a half circumference of his viewpoint and all you hear is his breathing because he knows somebody's out there lurking behind him, in front of him. They're somewhere hidden and he's just waiting for them to make a move, and it's felt like something out of like a Call of Duty video game, and I thought he captured that perfectly, almost like something I would love to emulate in a movie one day. So definitely props on how this guy shoots action. And it is very shocking at many points when it comes to the violence. And I also felt too that, you could have had anybody else playing Pedro Pascal's part. You could have had anybody else playing the Emma Stone part as well. Because I kind of like what they did with her as the wife of Joaquin
Mhm.
Phoenix. But because her screen time is so limited, I'm like, anybody else could have played this part. Why did it necessarily have to be Emma Stone? But given those nitpicks, I really did like this film. And I think I don't like it as much as One Battle After Another, but it's up there.
But I also, what I think I really liked about this film, and what maybe a lot of people don't like, is it doesn't tell you how to feel. And I think that's a problem for some film goers. They're like you said, you're asking what the point is. And I think that was the point of the film, is like, I'm not telling you how to feel. I'm just presenting you something. So I think that's what makes the film more powerful. And I'll admit, the so-so reviews kept me probably from going to see it in theaters. And now I kind of wish I would have gone to see it in theaters.
And
I
one thing
will
that I
admit,
wonder too, how did they get James Woods for a cameo?
where was he? And
Towards the end, they have that little montage of a certain character now talk to all these conservative right wing folks online, and one of them is James Woods.
oh, I mean, he's got to work too.
I
It's,
thought he retired though.
it's considering who the villains are, I think you could get them. You could probably get John Voight if you wanted. The only I thought you were going to say he was like the bum, the homeless man. I was going to say
Well, I knew
that.
that was coming.
Oh, okay. Because I was about to say that was James Woods. He really needs. He's just taking anything. But through that character, that shows how hypocritical both sides were, because even the liberals who are supposed to care so much kind of find the homeless man a pest and always want him to go away. And the conservatives, of course, want something done about him. And ultimately, he proves to, I guess, be the downfall of one of the characters. So, I mean, I could get into the deputy and the ending and
Yeah.
the scars of the ancestors, but that is more for maybe if we ever do a deep dive on the movie. But yeah, I mean, if it wasn't such a crowded year, I put Joaquin Phoenix out there for Best Actor for this film, and I thought he was that good. And for our final film, The Running Man, the remake, directed by Edgar Wright, co-written by Edgar Wright and Michael Bacall. This is kind of a remake reboot of the original The Running Man that is a little more faithful to the book. And again, all-star extravaganza, Glenn Powell, Katie O'Brien, Josh Brolin, Coleman Domingo, Lee Evans, William H. Macy, uh, Michael Sarah, and um, look, I'm a big Edgar Wright fan. I think this might be his worst film. Because the problem with this film, other than the Michael Sarah sequences where it's unpredictable and fun, this movie could have been directed by anybody. This does not have an Edgar Wright stamp on it. It just feels strangely corporate. Like this should have probably been the original version of the movie, with, all the special effects going outside, which I appreciate, maybe it not being in a studio, but it doesn't make the most of it because you can still tell most of the locations are backlots. Um, it's just another reviewer on TikTok named Cuss Creep put it best. This film needs an iconic star at the middle of it so that you care. Sort of like how Running Man is built all around Arnold Schwarzenegger and his image. And we don't have that type of star. Maybe Tom Cruise, but he'd be long in tooth for this. But you need a star of that stature where you center everything around. And as likable as Glenn Powell is, charm ain't gonna get you through this film, especially when your character's supposedly supposed to be so angry, and it's just like he seems just reasonable to me. He doesn't seem like a very angry guy most of the time. So you have that. All the big names are here more for cameos. Even Josh Brolin playing the villain is more of an extended cameo. And it plays into the politics of 2000, where, instead of the host being the villain, it's the CEO. Dun, dun, dun. So it just feels like it's trying to be kind of politically modern, but it is supposed to be futuristic. So shouldn't it be a little more unpredictable? It's like, and again, even though I know Schwarzenegger disliked the flat look, and this is definitely not a flat look, but at least Schwarzenegger's film had more moments I remember, of the film. This film, the only thing I remember is the Michael Cera scenes. That's it, because that's when the film goes truly crazy. And then even like you could say the Maria Conchita Alonso character, who's supposed to be so important, and this film isn't even introduced till the third act.
Yeah.
So it's so random. And William H. Macy, let's face it, that role really could have been written out. And
That was a
again,
paycheck job.
pretty much, and it's 20 minutes too long. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm just like, this is kind of long again, especially when you're not necessarily the biggest fan of this film. So I I don't believe this, but this is the first Edgar Wright movie where I'm going to say I don't recommend. But I will say it's probably better seeing it in a theater than seeing it on streaming if you are going to watch it. Andre, what did you think of The Running Man? And
Well, initially when this was announced, I said, this is a fine remake to do because the Schwarzenegger movie, it's fun, but it's not a secret cow compared to Terminator and Predator. He clearly had said, as you mentioned, that the original had a lot of flaws. There were things that they didn't really explore, and there was a lot of deviations from the Stephen King novel. So to do it now, and you had a smart director and you had a likable actor, I felt like this couldn't go wrong. And then I watch it, and here's the thing. I think it starts very strong when it comes to establishing how Ben Richards can't hold down a job. His daughter is sick. The wife is like, she's not an exotic dancer or anything, but she has to work in that type of environment.
mhm.
So he's basically forced into doing the running man for the sake of the family. So, okay, you have the emotional part down pat. And the nods to the original are pretty much downplayed. You get the dancers during the show sequences. You got Schwarzenegger on the dollar bills, which was nice to have. And then once you get into the action, I was like into it, all the way through the Michael Cera scene. I was into like sort of this mix between the original Running Man and Total Recall because it really is more of a chase through the different cities, different disguises he has to wear, and encountering different people that help him along the way. But everybody's out to kill him, screw him over, try to rat him out so that they can get the prize money. So it was going someplace. But I think once you got past the Michael Cera scene, that's where it lost steam because then it just became a generic action picture like they were trying to do Mission Impossible all of a sudden. And yeah, that girl came in way too late into the film. The stuff with the black dude and his brother that was like in the middle section, and they don't come back till towards the end. I mean, that the biggest problem for me was the ending, and I know that was a concern for a lot of people, and it was the fact that you have this big finale on the plane with the only real killer that's supposed to be the big giant threat, and then they have to hastily get to the ending when Josh Brolin finally gets to come up and it just felt like a big fuck you to the audience. That to me is where I will say that falls on the feet of Edgar Wright and Michael Bacall that they couldn't come up with a definitive ending. Not that the original ending of the 87 movie was fantastic, but it was satisfying to build up to that point. This didn't feel like that. And Glenn Powell, to me, I think he is talented and he's likable, but he's fallen into that trap of being the manufactured movie star. The guy that he got that role in Top Gun. Now everybody thinks, oh, we can push him to be the next big thing. And nobody is responding to him in the way that Hollywood wants him to be responded to. And I think that's the biggest problem with this movie. Like you said, he's supposed to be angry and he starts out that way. But once the game starts, then there's all the the quips and satirical things and him having to do one-liners. And thank God they didn't like try to borrow any of Arnold's one-liners like they tried to do in certain movies like Total Recall, the remake. So that didn't work for me. And Katie O'Brien was wasted. I found out later she was basically playing the Yapikoto part. And she just disappears. And then we see her death scene. It's like, why is she even in this if you're going to take her out like that? So yeah, this was one of the biggest letdowns of the year, and absolutely. And I thought Last Night in Soho was going to be his worst, and actually it isn't. I actually thought that's an artistic feat, even if it didn't do well. But this is definitely like he's got a bad streak with American films, unfortunately. He did well with Scott Pilgrim despite its box office failure, but when it comes to anything else, he's got to get a good marketing team because his marketing team sucks when it comes to his American films, and this movie doesn't help his case.
Well, with this film, also one of the weaknesses was the other killers not memorable at all, except for maybe the one other character's outfits with the beret. And I know it's a nitpick, but when the black character's mother throws him out because she doesn't want that type of man in her house. Now
But
you've been
that was so dumb.
Exactly. You've been living with revolutionaries who's been telling you about propaganda. And then now all of a sudden, I don't want him in my house. It was like, this is stupid. Like bad writing. So I understand maybe you needed to get him to that point, but there could have been a better way. Like maybe seeing the sick child, he knew that they would eventually come to that house and he chose to leave on his own volition. That would have been smarter. But like I said, I wish it was better, but this just feels like his version of selling out sort of to Hollywood a bit with this film. So I can't give it a full recommendation. I don't give it a recommendation at all. I can't recommend this film. Are you in agreement? Do you give it a recommendation or no?
I agree. I was really disappointed with this. And it even made me think because he was part of the marketing campaign, maybe Tom Cruise would have done better with this.
I feel like he would have been too old. Like
He would have been too old, but he would have sold it better.
He would have sold it. I mean, maybe we'd still be talking about it like Mission Impossible, how we're not really talking about that movie. But also Tom Cruise would have taken over the movie.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that too. But he would have short the quality, even if it was too expensive.
Well, yeah, because now even he can't get the budgets he wants, so. But, I mean, like I said, you need an icon. Maybe if this had even tried to be Will Smith's comeback movie, it would have. I think he could have sold it. Hey, he's got the anger. We've seen him display it. I mean, now, maybe Jada could have been the villain. Then we definitely could have believed this movie. But yeah, I'm like, I wanted to. I was rooting for this film, but I'm just like, yeah. And again, no fault to Glenn Powell, because trust me, even if you put Chris Evans in it, it would not have saved this film.
No, it would have bombed with Chris Evans anyway.
Yep, and it would have probably gone to Netflix. So that ends the reviews for this episode. But as you know, we always have unfinished business in the future. So I have to ask you, have you seen Kill the Jockey? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what movie would you recommend for the people?
Have you seen the movie True Believer with Robert Downey Jr.? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
And with that, we bid you adieu.
If you like this review, please be sure to like and hit subscribe to be alerted to new episodes in the future.